In prison.
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
we're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Today with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. On the eve of facing a kangaroo court designed to destroy his political career, Boris Johnson's fight back against the Westminster witch hunt has begun. But if his bombshell 52-page defence dossier fails to end this MSM-supported stitch-up, A very dangerous political precedent will be set. I'm going to explain why this matters for British democracy in my digest next. Then my superstar panel give their view tonight. I'm joined by Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. Also on the show, the damning Casey report has concluded that the Met Police is racist, sexist and broken, but the Forces Commissioner has denied it's an institutional issue.
Don't accept that your force is institutionally racist.
The reason, and I respect Louise using that term, the reason I don't use it, I think it's a very ambiguous term.
So, as a Whitehall source claims nothing is off the table, is it time to break up the world's most famous force? Three of Britain's most respected coppers, Norman Brennan, Maggie Oliver and Harry Miller, debate that in The Clash shortly. In What the Farage, Nigel reacts to the shocking news that the number of hotels housing migrants has more than doubled in just 5 months, and he'll reveal why the problem is actually even worse than we think. After Gary Glitter receives a £15,000 knee operation on the NHS, is it the only op actually that he should be receiving? Actually, chemical castration. Well, former Tory Education Minister, our very own culture warrior Andrea Jenkins unveils her controversial idea to deal with child sex offenders later in the show. Plus, could these drug confessions from the Duke of Dobe see him deported from the US?
At someone's country house during a shooting weekend. I'd been offered a line and I'd done a few more since. It wasn't much fun.
Esteemed royal biographer Tom Bauer explores the serious questions being asked about Prince Harry's US visa application in Uncounselled. Elsewhere on the show, with a liberated ISIS sex slave came in, Shamima Begum learned how to use suicide belts and guns at a terrorist training camp. Documentary maker Alan Duncan, who uncovered this tragic witness after fighting against ISIS in Syria, speaks out on his disturbing findings that prove why the Begum must never be allowed to return to the country. And as a Snowflake student union deplatforms Baroness Claire Fox because she found this Ricky Gervais joke funny.
Old women, I mean the old-fashioned ones, you know, the old-fashioned women. Oh, God, you know, the ones with wombs. Oh.
Funny, right? So have the intolerant youth of today become a menace to society by deplatforming her? We'll get stuck into that in the media buzz. A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and a brand new Greatest Britain Union jackass named before the night is out too. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. So this kangaroo court is going to be sitting in Westminster tomorrow. Most of the MSM don't want to actually talk about the repercussions of what this actually means to British democracy. So I'm going to do so in my digest very shortly. First, though, the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story tonight on GB News. A damning report into Britain's largest police force has been described by the Home Secretary as very concerning. Baroness Louise Casey, who led the review, found the Met Police to be institutionally racist, misogynist and homophobic. The report also found the Met's current ethics standards and disciplinary procedures have, to quote, failed abysmally. And she's calling for a complete overhaul of the service. Suella Braverman says she has every faith now Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley will be a catalyst for change, and she's vowed to hold officers and the Mayor of London to account. Well, as you've been hearing on Dan's introduction there, Boris Johnson has accepted he misled Parliament over Partygate, but he maintains it wasn't intentional or reckless. Submitting his 52-page defence dossier to the Privileges Committee today, the former Prime Minister admitted gatherings at Downing Street during lockdown should never have happened. He also said statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He's due to give more evidence in person before MPs tomorrow. International news, and Russia has strengthened ties with China, saying it's prepared to step up its oil deliveries to the country. President Putin made the comments on the second day of the Chinese leader's state visit to Moscow, describing talks with President Xi as constructive, adding he hoped they could remain in contact. Yesterday, President Putin welcomed his dear friend to the Kremlin, as he put it, and the pair discussed China's peace plan for Ukraine. Now, in the United States, people have been protesting outside Trump Tower in New York, calling for the authorities to condemn the former US president over an alleged hush money payment. Donald Trump has been accused of paying off a porn actress in the run-up to the 2016 election. If Trump is charged, it would be the first criminal case brought against a US president. Former National Security Advisor to Mr. Trump, John Bolton, told Nigel Farage earlier, the important thing is if Mr. Trump is convicted.
The real question here is not whether Trump gets indicted. I think that's coming in days. I don't know exactly when, but it's days, not weeks, in the Stormy Daniels matter. The real issue is, will he get convicted? If he is acquitted, I think that will give Trump the Republican nomination and could elect him to the presidency.
Now, lastly, the Prince of Wales has brought together some of the UK's biggest companies in a business task force to back her campaign about early childhood. Companies including Lego, IKEA and Unilever joined the Princess in London earlier today. Kensington Palace says the task force will play an essential role in the Princess's work to transform the way society prioritises and supports children in their earliest years. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Back now to Dan Wootton.
So tomorrow, a kangaroo court that threatens to undermine British parliamentary democracy will take place at Westminster. And the MSM will sit on the sidelines cheering on this dangerous farce because it suits their agenda. The Privileges Committee, with a Labour chairwoman Harriet Harman, who prejudged the outcome before hearing any evidence, will sit as the judge, jury and executioner in deciding the future political career of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The so-called crime, which could result in Boris being suspended from Parliament and facing a recall petition effectively ending his hopes of returning to number 10, hangs on whether he, quote, knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament when answering questions about Partygate, where he, as all Prime Ministers do, relied on assurances provided to him by civil servants and advisers. But there's nothing normal about this Westminster witch hunt. There is no precedent for such a stitch-up. So who decides if Boris recklessly intended to do anything? Why has the committee only released selective evidence with statements seemingly deliberately taken out of context? And aren't they aware of the chilling effect such an approach will have on future Prime Ministers answering questions in the House of Commons? Now, Boris' allies are largely being ignored in the mainstream media hunt to bring him down, but when they are given the opportunity to speak publicly, they're horrified.
How can a handful of members of parliament and a committee, really be that objective in light of some of the individual comments that have been made? I don't want to name people, but, it is a fact. The lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
I'm concerned that it will be a witch hunt, and I'm concerned to read in papers that obviously are being briefed by everybody left, right and centre, of concern that we're going to get a McCarthyite approach to justice on the Privileges Committee.
The committee has decided to stand outside the rule of law and to abandon justice. They have denied him access to proper legal counsel. They've denied his legal counsel the ability to ask questions. They are going to edit his defence. No court would edit a defendant's defence.
And today, the committee finally released the 52-page defence dossier from Boris himself. In my mind, and I've read it all, I've read every word, it categorically proves he neither knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament, while also making a mockery of his government's own COVID regulations and guidelines that blighted and destroyed so many lives 3 years ago and which he should never have agreed to implement. But the fact that it's been just accepted that this committee has shape-shifted in a bid to end the Prime Ministerial ambitions of the man elected in an 80-seat landslide less than 4 years ago is a disgrace. So I'm going to share with you now some key parts of Boris's evidence. First, he slams the committee, listening to his proven enemy Dominic Cummings, writing, "There is no evidence at all that supports an allegation that I intentionally or recklessly misled the House. The only exception is the assertions of the discredited Dominic Cummings, which are not not supported by any documentation. And Boris then goes on to say, it is no secret that Cummings bears an animus towards me, having publicly stated on multiple occasions that he wanted to do everything that he could to remove me from power. He cannot be treated as a credible witness. Now, Boris goes on to slam the profound and debilitating implications for the future of debate in the House if it is considered reckless for a PM to rely on assurances from trusted advisers. He writes, that allegation is unprecedented and absurd. I was the Prime Minister of the country working day and night to manage the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And other than the Sue Gray report, which should surely now be discredited given that she is Keir Starmer's choice to be his new Chief of Staff, the so-called rigorous and thorough investigation has uncovered no smoking guns. As Boris writes, the committee did not identify a single document which suggested that I was informed or warned by anyone that any event at Number 10 was contrary to the rules or guidance. It fails to refer to the fact that a significant number of witnesses gave evidence that I had in fact received assurances that the rules were complied with at Number 10, and it fails to refer to the fact that the view of many other officials working at Number 10 was that the rules and guidance were being complied with. Tomorrow's show trial marks a new low for Westminster and could be a dangerous precedent for Parliament, allowing a block of MPs' desire to finish off an electorally popular rival to outweigh the public's democratic will. But to respond now, my superstar panel, the author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, GB News presenter and Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Christine Hamilton, I read this all today, and I cannot see at all how this Privileges Committee think that they can prove that Boris Johnson recklessly misled Parliament. But the problem is, there's no precedent for deciding if anyone has recklessly done anything. And that's why I believe this is now a kangaroo court.
Well, we'll see what decision the committee come to in the end. But, I mean, you're quite right. This whole court is so flawed. The idea that Harriet Harman, who has already publicly said that she thinks Boris lied, how can she sit as the judge in all this? She's sitting there like Madame Defarge in Tale of Two Cities, just waiting to slam the guillotine down and watch the heads roll. That's what she wants to do. And for the rest of the committee, I mean, Chris Bryant recused himself as chairman because he knew that he had publicly criticised Boris. The rest of them, honestly, they are just longing for their moment of glory.
But Harman did the same thing. I mean, she tweeted.
Yeah, no, I know that's why. Of course, she shouldn't. I mean,
she should have recused herself.
Of course, she should. No, sorry, I thought I said that earlier. Of course, she should. It's absolutely outrageous that she should sit in the judge. She's already pre-decided it. Of course she has. They've taken evidence from people anonymously, which is the only cases where you can do that anonymously is rape cases where the victim or the alleged victim gets anonymity. So that is absurd. And, I mean, yes, everybody knows that Boris... Sorry, there's a fly in here and I think I just swallowed it. Everybody knows that Boris lies. It's sort of, you know, it's just taken as read. I mean, does Boris lie? Does Boris breathe? Yes, of course. But I have seen no evidence at all that he lied to this committee. And if they decide that he has, then, as you said, this sets an incredibly dangerous precedent. I mean, Rishi Sunak, when he spoke to the House of Commons about the Windsor framework, we now know from the ERG that, frankly, he was, so we say, very elastic with the truth. And they have pointed out that certain things he said are not correct.
Well, Calvin, this is potentially going to set a hugely dangerous precedent because actually just in recent weeks you have to look at Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. There are examples of them recklessly misleading the House. Now, are they going to be hauled before a Privileges Committee? And the danger here is that Prime Ministers will now get up in Parliament and say, no, I can't comment on this. We've got to wait to an official investigation. And so actually this could be used to stop politicians being held to account.
Yeah, it's not about Boris misleading or recklessly misleading the House of Parliament. What this is about is the globalists wanted Rishi Sunak in power. They wanted a coup. They got that coup. And now they want to make sure that Boris Johnson does not come back. Because he still could get back into number 10. He's still a threat. They want to finish him off, like you said. I mean, look at how they treated Tony Blair. Warmonger, war criminal, you could say. No one went after him. Look how they treated Matt Hancock. He was caught breaking the rules with his adulterer, with his lover. He didn't get any consequences for that, nor did he get receive any consequences from Parliament, at least.
Well, and also, what about the current Prime Minister too? Because I'm not saying for a single second that I think the Privileges Committee should investigate Rishi Sunak, but Rishi Sunak stood up in the House of Commons and also denied that he was at any parties or gatherings, and he received the same fixed penalty.
But speaking of recklessness, Matt Hancock's decision to put elderly people into care homes with or without testing them for COVID, and then buying more midazolam than we ever have before, all of these things were reckless. Are they going after him? No, of course not. They want to finish Boris Johnson. It's about him personally being a threat to the globalist coup of Rishi Sunak.
But they won't, He's like the body. You nail him down in the coffin and he will get out. Oh, yes, he will rise again.
You say that this is a witch hunt.
No,
you say that this is. Sorry, you say this is not a witch.
I don't think it's a witch
hunt
because witches aren't real, so you can't really hunt for them. Whereas liars are real, and Boris Johnson is an inveterate liar. And I think there are women all over London who've been nodding sagely at the screen to hear that. I think the reality is, if you wanted to finish Boris Johnson off, this is the worst thing you could have done, because we've waited long enough that people are no longer as cross as they once were. People were heartbroken and people were furious, but people don't have that attention span. And similarly, the one thing Boris Johnson is really good at, the one thing he's good at, is performing. And he will get out there and he will look for validation from every single person in the room. He's a show pony. He will speak Latin. He will have messy hair. We all know what we're getting. And there is a part of you that will be like, oh, he's not that bad, is he?
Do you think this could backfire?
He will 100% get away with it, unquestionably.
Get away with what?
Well, with having lied. And I think we all know deep down he probably did things in the office that he wasn't supposed to do.
Have you read the report today?
But no.
OK, well, if you read the report, I think you'd come to a different conclusion.
No, they had a different system where they were at work. It was a mob mentality. They were together all day, every day. I would have stayed for a glass of wine in a heartbeat. But they did do things, I think, from what I've read, that we couldn't have got away with legally.
But the committee isn't investigating whether Boris broke the rules or bent the rules in Number 10. They are investigating whether he'd misled Parliament. Now, if he deliberately misled Parliament, that is serious. But I don't.
But he didn't, because in this 52-page document, what you actually realise is that Boris did not intentionally mislead Parliament, because he wasn't at any of the gatherings that then turned into parties and that did need to be, or not need to be, that
but
were
how do you
lied
prove
about.
that in a dossier? I could write a thing being like, oh yeah, I didn't break any of the rules either. It wouldn't be true.
Well, surely
but his civil service
he's innocent
servants...
until proven guilty, right? So surely they have to prove otherwise.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I think...
Surely he's innocent unless proven guilty. That's the other thing.
I think it's more that I think he probably is guilty, but I'm not sure how much anybody cares anymore, because there are so many other things that to worry about.
Well, of course, but that is the point, isn't it? Partygate has never been a big story. As Calvin said, it has been used by the MSM, it's been used as...
I was saying it last year.
To undermine Boris Johnson, and now you've got the Prime Minister that you wanted. Well, I hope you're all happy. Rebecca
well, after the next election, we're going to have to choose between a vacuum or a void, aren't we? I mean, honestly. Yes. Well, look at the choice on offer.
My superstar paneler with me all night. Now, still to come. As migrant hotel numbers double, could the problem actually be far worse than we imagine? Nigel Farage joins me live on this to sound the alarm. But up next in the clash, after the damning Casey report concluded the Met Police is racist, sexist and broken, is it really now time to break up the UK's biggest force? Three of the country's most respected coppers, Norman Brennan, Maggie Oliver and Harry Miller, debate that in the clash tonight. That's straight after the break. But I want to know what you think. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GBNews on Twitter. The results straight after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Nigel Farage coming up live, but it's time now for The Clash. And the damning Casey review into the Met has concluded the force is racist, sexist and broken. This morning, Suella Braverman said London's police had a long road to recovery, but rejected lazy Labour claims that they lay the blame at her door.
There is the Home Office plan in response to this on standards, on neighbourhood policing, on violence against women and girls, and on systemic or institutional discrimination. Where are those plans?
Londoners have been let down by the Met. The Shadow Home Secretary knows who is ultimately responsible for that. She shouldn't be looking to scoring political points today. It's a disappointment, and frankly, she should know better.
Despite accepting the findings, Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has rejected the left's fixation on insisting the force is institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic.
You accept the full findings of the report?
I accept the findings of the report, absolutely.
The full findings of the report?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the point you're making.
You know exactly what I mean, Sir Mark. We're
report.
talking about your suggestions that you don't accept that your force is institutionally racist.
The reason, and I respect Louise using that term, the reason I don't use it, I think it's a very ambiguous term.
I purposefully looked it up in the dictionary this morning. Institutionally means convention or norm in a culture, and that's what Louise Casey thinks is happening in the Met.
So taking all of that into consideration, what do you think? Is it time to break up the Met Police? Dan at gbnews.uk, vote in our poll at GB News. But look, I'm going to bring in 3 of the country's top cops now. Former police officer Harry Miller, founder of the Fair Cop campaign group, retired police officer of 31 years, Norman Brennan, and Maggie Oliver, a former detective constable and whistleblower, of course, in the Rochdale grooming scandal. And Maggie, of course, you put everything on the line to blow the whistle in your particular case in Rochdale. Do you think that the Met is corrupt, and is the solution breaking it up?
I'm not sure whether the solution is to break it up, but what I do know is
that the Met needs strong leadership. It doesn't have strong leadership. If you look at the Majesty's Inspectorate, it's toothless. And if you look at the Mayor of London, he's useless. He's far more interested in ULEZ and locking down Londoners than he is in sorting out and giving strong leadership to the police force. So we do have problems, but the answer lies with strong leadership as far as I'm concerned, and the Met hasn't had it.
Maggie Oliver?
Problem is, it isn't just the Met, Dan. This is police forces throughout the country. My experience spans over 30 years. As a serving police officer, I experienced sexism, misogyny when I was in my probation. Obviously, the Rochdale case is why I'm known. And I literally went to the top of the organisation pleading for victims to be supported. And I was treated as though I was the enemy. So it is a culture, it is mismanagement, it is lack of effective leadership, it is the police marking their own homework. And I've been saying for a long time, Dan, we need a royal commission into policing. It is unaccountable, it covers up their own mistakes, and we really need massive overhaul of what is absolutely a failing system that is failing the public and in which the public have lost all trust. And the final point I would say, Dan, is that the latest experience I have is within the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and we are approached every single day by victims and survivors who are being blamed, who are being let down, who are not having their serious sexual offences investigated and prosecuted. Nothing has changed, and this review is very brave, but we need action now, not just more words.
Norman Brennan, I know that you feel like policing is broken and that the Met have certainly lost the respect of the streets, but I believe you have real concerns, Norman, at the concept of actually breaking up the force.
Yeah, we don't have the time to break up the Metropolitan Police or any police force in Britain at this moment in time. Policing is broken. I've been involved in law and order and policing for 43 years. I've seen the good, the bad and the indifferent. Today, I see catastrophe. I see a broken police service. I see the public failed. I see victims failed. And I see too many people within policing that have been blind to what's going on. We have too many frontline PCs that have no respect. They don't say sergeant, inspector, ma'am, sir. And the too many sergeants and inspectors that are looking for promotion, and that is sometimes is their primary concern over the protection of public and looking after victims and supervising frontline, whiz up the ranks to such a rank that they are detached from frontline policing. So policing has become lost. The public are the losers, and we are losing police officers today like never before. And unless we fix our house, not with rogue traders, but with proper professional police leaders with vision, passion, direction that are true leaders, I'm afraid the police service will not be reformed like it needs to be.
Harry Miller, isn't one of the great ironies in all of this? Oh, sorry, Maggie, you come in and then I'll get to Harry.
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that and say to Norman that, I believe that the promotion system is in large part to blame for this, because a police officer gets to the rank of DI, and from that rank forward, promotion is all down to cronyism and who you get along with and get your best mate into the job. For me, it's at the top that we need these changes. There are a lot of good on the street bobbies who are not properly supported, not properly paid, not trained effectively. It's at the top. And
I worry about them. I worry about them because, of course, my fundamental belief, I come from a family of police officers. My fundamental belief is I want to support the police. But, Harry Miller, you say one of the great ironies in all of this is that you look at what the Casey report has found, and it is appalling behaviour, the least woke behaviour you could get. But actually, so many of the bosses are obsessed with these non-hate crime orders and appeasing the woke mob. And the two things really don't go together.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, since the McPherson report, let's remember, we've been here before with McPherson following the murder of Stephen Lawrence. The police were invited by McPherson to check their own thinking, primarily to check their own attitude. Now, in 2020 to 2021, there were over 2,000 accusations of racism directed at the Met Police. Now, that should have resulted in at least 2,000 non-crime hate incidents. Do you know how many there were? 1. The police have not put their house in order. Whilst they've been liberally dishing out non-crime hate incidents to the public, they have been willfully blind about their own failings. So I'm not surprised at all that we're in this position. And of course, they cover it all up by being woke.
Yeah, indeed. And that I all agree with. Norman Brennan, one thing, though, that the left seem to have become obsessed with today is this word institutionally. And I'm going to be honest with you, Norman, I have an issue with saying that the police is institutionally racist, institutionally sexist, institutionally homophobic, because actually that's then starting to say that as a society we are institutionally racist and sexist and homophobic, and I don't believe that, Norman.
We shouldn't get caught up with sideshows. We don't need them. What we need now is to get the public confidence back. The thing of what Maggie mentioned earlier on a Royal Commission, that will take about 5 years. I think that is far too long. By the time 5 years is up, the dynamics of policing would change. I'm here not to defend the indefensible, but the tens of thousands of frontline police officers that book on each day that are as disgusted as all of us about those that have brought the police service to its knees. If you want to know a solution, Dan, quickly, we need to recruit officers that are the right ones to join. The 9 Sir Robert Peel principles are what they all need to have. We need to make sure they're vetted, that they're right ones to join. We take them back to 16 weeks at training school so the trainers can pick out those that have got through the actual application status. And every police officer that puts their helmet on and a warrant card in their pocket knows what the public wants, and they have to rebuild that. We need police officers to be accountable, and we need to remember that a big bath of clear water, if you put a bit of ink of the corrupt and bad officers, it affects everybody. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's let the dust settle, and let's all roll our sleeves up, the public and the police working together. The alternative, I'm afraid, is dire.
Fascinating conversation with 3 of Britain's most respected police officers. A great pleasure to have you tonight. Harry Miller, of course, was the founder of the Fair Cop campaign group. A retired officer of 31 years, Norman Brennan, just there. And before that, Maggie Oliver, the legendary former detective constable, the whistleblower, of course, in the Rochdale grooming scandal. But who do you agree with? Is it time to break up the Met? Dee on Twitter says, the majority do a great job under extreme stress. And if I was one of those officers, I would be extremely offended by this report. Sean writes, not broken up, but the bad ones need to be weeded out who spoil it for the rest who do a great job. And from Lee, the Met is a great force. There will be bad eggs in any walk of life, but it depends on the focus. Everyone is looking for the negative. The majority do an amazing job, and right now a minority are letting all of them down. And you know what? This is one of our closest clash polls ever. 49.9% of you think the Met should be broken up. 50.1% of you say it should not. So a country divided on this issue at the moment, and our viewers divided too. Still to come, as migrant hotel numbers double. Could the problem be worse than we imagine? Nigel Farage joins me very soon to sound the alarm. But next, after Gary Glitter receives a £15,000 knee operation on the NHS, should chemical castration be the only operation he receives? Former Tory Education Minister, our culture warrior Andrea Jenkins unveils her controversial idea to deal with sex offenders. She's live straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nigel Farage live shortly, but first, disgraced pop star of yesteryear Gary Glitter was just halfway through his 16-year prison sentence for sexually abusing schoolgirls when he was released last month, and it's been revealed that the sordid singer was treated to some pretty special treatment behind bars, courtesy of the already overburdened NHS. So The Sun has revealed that Glitter received a £15,000 knee replacement in an NHS hospital back in November, despite hundreds of other patients facing a 4-month wait for the same procedure, with the source exposing how he left young female staff disgusted with chilling stories about his offending and, I quote, pervy antics during his 5-day taxpayer-funded hospital stay. So I'm sorry, why on earth are we prioritising NHS care for prison paedophiles like Gary Glitter over ordinary Brits? Well, joining me live in the studio tonight is our culture warrior, the Tory MP, former Vice Chair of the European Research Group and Education Minister, Andrea Jenkins. Now, Andrea, prompted by this story, I believe that the only sort of treatment you think paedophiles in Britain should receive is chemical castration.
Actually, biological castration. I wish the surgeon's knife had slipped lower, didn't you, Dan, with Glitter? To me, they are the lowest of the low paedophiles, and there's only one thing for them, the chop, and they all go to the knackers yard.
And this does happen in a lot of other countries, doesn't it? This isn't some extreme policy. You know, Ukraine, many states of the US do this, some African
Czech
countries.
Republic as well, yeah. Absolutely.
And do you think it would be popular?
I think so, definitely. And, you know, not only that regarding paedophiles, I'd go a stage further as well. Child killers. There's been far too many, once too many, and I think they should have the lethal injection. They don't deserve to breathe in my books.
No, I think these would be very popular policies, and I have to say, hearing about glitter, clearly absolutely no remorse. Why on earth should the NHS be operating?
And why should we pay for, as British taxpayers, why should we be paying a penny towards people like this?
Indeed, indeed. Now, look, after he was outrageously ousted from Downing Street in a globalist, anti-democratic coup last summer, the political witch hunt against Boris Johnson still not over. This Privileges Committee, of course, will hear evidence tomorrow. And despite insisting in written evidence that he did not intentionally or recklessly mislead Parliament in his statements over Partygate, Johnson's detractors seem determined to drag him down by any means necessary. So, Andrea Jenkins, as an MP, how disgusted are you by what's going to happen at Westminster tomorrow?
Oh, completely. I mean, let's go back to the Magna Carta. You know, the Englishman should have the right to a fair trial. Boris has not had that. We've seen the chairman of the committee, how she's already made her thoughts clear. She's judge, jury and executioner, and it's just not right. And I'm sure you agree, Dan. How come the left get away with it? Look at Keir Starmer. Look at him having his beer and curry. Boris was in the workplace with his work colleagues, and he got fined. Rishi got fined. Why was there nothing regarding Keir Starmer?
And also Rishi, who's the current Prime Minister. And by the way, I don't think Rishi should be facing the Privileges Committee, but what it does show is there is an agenda against Boris. Now, look, you are personally, though, a big supporter of Boris, aren't you? You believe in him. And you like him, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the left and the media just villainise him. And if I can just give you...
What's he like?
Him and Carrie are amazing. Can I just give you an example? Last November, my sister was in a coma, my mum was dying, and Boris and Carrie went to a church. They both lit some candles for my mum and my sister, sent me the picture and prayed for them. I mean, that was wonderful. I've had so much support from them since my mum passed away.
And did you hear from Rishi?
Well, when my mum passed away, I got no letter, I got nothing.
Which maybe does say a lot. Now, look, of course, other big news today. The EIG, you're obviously a former deputy chairperson of the European Research Group, and Mark Francois, the current chairman, has announced that he will vote against Rishi Sunak's Windsor framework with concerns that it does not give Northern Ireland a veto over EU law. So, Andrea, you're a Spartan, you know, you're a true Brexit believer. Can you tell me now whether you're going to vote for the Stormont break tomorrow?
No, I'm going to vote against, Dan.
So you're going to join Mark Francois?
Oh, completely.
And the DUP?
And the DUP. And, I mean, if you look, we've had Bill Cash, Martin Howe, you know, we've had lawyers poring over this. And this isn't Brexit. This isn't... We're treating Northern Ireland differently, and that's wrong. And I'm sure you'll see some other big beasts of Brexit in that same lobby as us tomorrow.
Well, I was going to say, look, there's going to be a lot of interest, of course, in Boris Johnson tomorrow at the Privileges Committee, but also this vote.
Yes,
you know,
of course.
What's he going to do? Do you have any indication if he will vote against Sunak?
I think watch his space, Dan. But, I mean... Boris is Mr Brexit. I mean, look how he fought hard against all the lefty Remainers in Parliament, including the Speaker at the time, in Bercow, to get Brexit. You know, he is our Brexit man. He's the reason we got this majority in Parliament. So I think watch his space, Dan.
So would you say it's impossible to be a true Brexiteer and vote for the Stormont break tomorrow?
Well, I can't put words in other people's mouths, but as a Spartan myself, who's I mean, I fought for a referendum as well. I had colleagues in the tea room avoiding speaking to me, but, you know, it was worth it because, you know, I'm a Democrat. And
absolutely.
And to me, but Boris got elected at the general election. That's why I've supported him. Brexit was voted for in the referendum, and we should honour democracy.
It was worth it then. It cannot be undermined now. And so I give huge credit, by the way, to the small number, but who knows, maybe a bigger number of Tory MPs like you tomorrow who will be brave enough to vote against the Stormont break. Because if you were a true Brexiteer, I think you know it's the right thing to do. And I imagine, I know we don't know for sure, but I imagine we will see Boris Johnson vote against this bill, which of course sets up the next chapter of Sunak versus Johnson.
I think there may be a good chance.
Yeah, indeed. We will see tomorrow night. Andrew
Thank
Jenkins,
you.
our culture warrior, former education minister, thank you so much. But still to come, as the Metropolitan Police Force faces calls to be disbanded, are the militant left taking advantage of the Met's failings to push their dangerous defund the police mantra? You know, this is what BLM pushed in the US. Are they bringing it here now? That's a big debate after 10. But next, as the number of hotels housing migrants more than doubles in just 5 months, Nigel Farage reveals why the problem is actually even worse than we think. He's live with me straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What the Farage time now, and shocking Home Office figures have revealed the incredible strain uncontrollable migration is putting on the country. An anonymous government source told the BBC, of all places, that there are now more than 51,000 migrants taking up residence in 395 hotels across the country, costing the taxpayer an eye-watering £6 million a day. The number of migrant hotels has reportedly doubled in the past 5 months, and that figure represents a staggering 2,000% increase in just 3 years. And Nigel joins me now. Nigel, what do you make of these shocking figures?
They're not right.
Really?
They're based on a newspaper writing to local authorities, and everybody's picked it up as if it's true. Right. I've got an FOI answer from the Home Office dated 31st December confirming 452 hotels.
Wow.
Okay.
So it's even bigger.
Yeah. And I can now show you a 9th of March FOI response saying, we're not going to tell you. We have decided we will not be releasing any new numbers because of the sensitivity of the situation. The Home Office are now refusing to tell the truth. So I'm miles ahead of all these ridiculous media reports. It was 400 back last October. All right. So we are now somewhere between 450 and 500 with no prospect of it reducing. And they thought by using former military bases, they might reduce the temperature. And now they've chosen the home of the Dam Busters raid in RA at Scampton, a place that is of huge cultural significance. Think of the film, the music, the amazing deeds that those men did on that night, almost exactly 80 years ago. So whichever way you cut this, the problem is getting worse. 500 young men crossed the Channel last weekend. And as we approach the May, June, July period, we can confidently expect tens of thousands more. And here's the really important point. Even if Suella succeeds, and by the way, I don't doubt her sincerity for one moment. I really don't doubt it. But even if she succeeds, we already have a massive problem on our hands.
We do. We absolutely do. Look, I want to move on to talk about Brexit because, of course, this moral authority that Sunak claimed to have when it came to the Windsor framework seems to be evaporating. Nigel, because we had the DUP yesterday, we had the ERG today, Andrea Jenkins here just before the break saying she's not going to be voting for this deal and heavily implying, Nigel, that Boris Johnson will also vote against the Stormont break tomorrow. Your thoughts?
Yes, wouldn't that be ironic? Boris Johnson, the man who sold out Northern Ireland to get a deal over the line, lied about it openly and publicly, and is now the saviour of Northern Ireland. I mean, you know, you've got to give Boris 10 out of 10 for political opportunism. Look, Sunak is the biggest spinner we've seen since Blair. You know, he comes out with this stuff. It's all very cleverly put together, well worded, and the Conservative press buy it hook, line, and sinker. And what you've seen today, of course, is the ERG, Bill Cash and others going through the legals, making you realise the Stormont break doesn't actually work. And the truth of it is that through Brexit, a part of the United Kingdom has been hived off. It's still under the control of the European Union. And that isn't just bad for Northern Ireland. It makes it more difficult for the rest of the UK to diverge from EU law. This is not Brexit. It's very simple. You know,
so if you're a Brexiteer, Nigel, if you're a true Brexiteer, because, you know, look at these folk like Steve Baker, Michael Gove, you know, who campaigned for Brexit. If they vote for Sunak's plan tomorrow, they can no longer say they're true Brexiteers in your view?
Yes, I mean, look, the truth of it is there were very few true Brexiteers in the Tory party. Very, very few. You know, there was never more than a few dozen Brexiteers in the Tory party. They were kicked and pushed by the UKIPs and the Brexit parties and the others into where they were. And yes, they will all go along with it for the sake of convenience. Labour will back it. And we find ourselves out of the European Union, but increasingly incapable of taking benefit from it. And that's why Northern Ireland is so significant. It isn't just about those 1.75 million people. It's the impact this deal has long-term on the rest of the UK's ability to break away and become more competitive. And goodness me, in a country of low productivity, low growth, and now high taxation, the one thing we need to become is competitive. Otherwise, we are just going to go backwards and backwards in the world leagues. So indeed. I think tomorrow is important.
Nigel, quick word on Donald Trump. Over the weekend, he predicted that he could actually be arrested today. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Perhaps an indictment could come out of New York tomorrow. But do you agree with folk all over the right wing of politics, from Elon Musk to Meghan McCain, not all fans of Trump, saying, look, if they go down this path, they're basically handing your mate the presidency?
Yes, I mean, I have to confess, a bit of me wants to see him arrested, to wake up middle America to the fact that the deep state is not a conspiracy theory, it's the truth, that the American judiciary is absolutely bent, and whilst the drug-addled Hunter Biden and Biden's brother take millions from Beijing, from Moscow, and from Kyiv, Trump, for what is no more than a financial rounding error, something that is merely, at worst, a misdemeanor, could receive an indictment. So in a way, we're almost at a point where worse is better. I don't want to see my friend with handcuffs on, but if that's what it takes to wake up middle America, then that's what it takes.
And what are you hearing, Nigel? Do you think they're going to go through with it?
Well, he's obviously preempted them quite cleverly. You know, he's obviously said, OK, guys, you know, come and get me. And they put, you know, security fences up around the New York court, and there are people milling around in Mar-a-Lago. Dan, I honestly don't know. I suspect what he's said will bring them to their senses, and they'll realise this would be counterproductive. But don't underestimate one thing. The Trump derangement syndrome is so great that it defies all logic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, it does. Nigel Farage, my goodness, well, it's going to be a big news day tomorrow, and you're going to want to be with Farage at 7 p.m. on GB News, no matter what you've got going on. Nigel will speak next week. But later in the show, as shocking new evidence emerges suggesting Shamima Begum underwent terror training with ISIS, documentary filmmaker Alan Duncan, who fought against ISIS in Syria, joins me to explain why she should never be allowed back to the UK. That is really shocking stuff. But first, with the Metropolitan Police engulfed in scandal, are the hard left hijacking the situation to push America's apocalyptic defund the police mantra? My superstar panel thrashed that one out. Plus, we're going to have tomorrow's first newspaper front pages hot off the press as well. Lots of going on in the next hour, so be back with us in just 2 minutes' time.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, on the eve of the Westminster witch hunt, Boris Johnson has dramatically published his defence dossier to prove he did not intentionally or recklessly mislead Parliament. But as his great political rival Rishi Sunak refuses to intervene...
It's a witch hunt. Do you agree? Look, that's ultimately something for Boris Johnson, and he'll have the committee process to go through, and that's a matter for Parliament. That's not what I'm focused on.
So is the current PM using a kangaroo court against the man he helped depose to secure his own premiership? That's the big debate with my superstar panel. And tonight, I'm joined by Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. As the damning Casey reported to the Met Police concludes it is institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic, there are widespread calls for radical reforms in the force. But do the hard left go too far with these proposals?
I've never been anti-police, defund the police, until I started doing this work, and I've been terrified and shocked by what I've learned.
So in what will be a fervent debate, we scrutinise whether it's wrong to use the Met's troubles to bring the damaging defund the police movement to the UK. That's in the Media Buzz next. Also coming up, as a liberated ISIS sex slave, said Shamima Begum had terrorism training on how to use guns and suicide vests. Alan Duncan, the documentary maker who uncovered this tragic witness, speaks out about his shock findings. Don't miss that major blow to the MSM's Begum Rehabilitation Project very shortly. Plus, as campaigners sensationally demand to know if Prince Harry admitted multiple drug use on his US visa application, has the Duke of Dope's boasting come back to bite him? Esteemed royal biographer Tom Bower analyses the prospect of a humiliating deportation from the US for Harry in Uncancelled later this hour. We'll also have a brand new Greater Nighters out too. Plus, the first front pages are in. They are hot off the press. Lots of reaction to the Boris story, so I'm going to show you them in just a few moments. First, though, Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story tonight on GB News, a damning report into Britain's largest police force has been described by the Home Secretary today as very concerning. Baroness Louise Casey, who led the review, found the Met Police to be institutionally racist, misogynist and homophobic. The report also found the Met's current ethics standards and disciplinary procedures have failed abysmally. And she's calling for a complete overhaul of the service. Suella Braverman said she now has every faith Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley will be a catalyst for change and has vowed to hold officers and the Mayor of London to account. Boris Johnson has accepted he misled Parliament over Partygate, but he maintains he wasn't intentional or reckless about it. Submitting his 52-page defence dossier to the Privileges Committee today, the former Prime Minister admitted gatherings at Downing Street during lockdown should never have happened. He also said statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He's due to give more evidence in person before MPs tomorrow. Russia has strengthened ties with China, saying it's prepared to step up its oil deliveries to the country. President Putin made the comments on the second day of the Chinese leader's state visit to Moscow, describing talks with President Xi as constructive, adding he hoped they could remain in contact. Yesterday, Putin welcomed his dear friend, as he called him, to the Kremlin, and the pair discussed China's peace plan for Ukraine. Now, as you've been hearing tonight on Dan's show, people have been protesting outside Trump Tower in New York, calling the authorities to condemn the former US president over an alleged hush money payment. Donald Trump has been accused of paying off a porn actress in the run-up to the 2016 elections. If Trump is charged, it would be the first criminal case brought against a former US president. Former National Security Advisor to Mr. Trump, John Bolton, told Nigel Farage earlier, the important thing is, if Mr. Trump gets convicted.
the real question here is not whether Trump gets indicted. I think that's coming in days. I don't know exactly when, but it's days, not weeks, in the Stormy Daniels matter. The real issue is, will he get convicted? If he is acquitted, I think that will give Trump the Republican nomination and could elect him to the presidency.
John Bolton speaking on GB News early this evening. Now, lastly, the Princess of Wales has brought together some of the UK's biggest companies in a business task force to back her campaign on early childhood. Companies including Lego, IKEA and Unilever joined the Princess in London earlier today. Kensington Palace says the task force will play an essential role in the Princess's work to transform the way society prioritises and supports children in their earliest years. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Dan.
Time for tomorrow's news tonight now in the Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, and the Metro leads on Boris Johnson's Partygate dossier that the former PM believes vindicates him from the accusation that he knowingly misled Parliament about his knowledge of lockdown parties at Number 10, with Boris arguing they weren't even proper whoppers. That's how the Metro puts it. It's D-Day for Johnson, says the Eye, as the former PM prepares to face 4 hours of televised questioning by the Privileges Committee that could decide his political career. And not very nice take from the Daily Star. I'm not a liar, I'm just a moron, is what they splash on, with a picture of Bojo mocked up as Pinocchio after his admission that he misled Parliament over parties, but only because he didn't realise any rules had actually been broken. My superstar panel, back with me now, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, the damning Casey report into the Met Police has concluded the force is institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Speaking earlier, the London's failed mayor, Sadiq Khan, pledged to clean up the Met, which was described by the report as broken.
Of course I apologise to those Londoners who feel let down. I apologise to Black, Asian, Irish ethnic Londoners. I apologise to women Londoners. I apologise to those from the LGBTQ+ community. They've been let down by generations of politicians. They've been let down by generations of commissioners. I want to be that politician that makes the change, and my mayoralty will be one where we reform the police service.
Oh, it's always about identity politics with them, isn't it? Other individuals representing the country's hard left are in favour of extreme action, with The Guardian's rabble-rouser Owen Jones tweeting today, "Abolish the Met Police," while in recent years many have advocated for the police to be defunded altogether. Look.
We do not want to invest within institutions that are inherently violent, that are inherently racist, and that continue to perpetuate cycles of harm, violence and abuse in our communities.
People aren't advocating defunding the police because they want the police to simply be punished in some way. They're talking about defunding the police as a reallocation of funding.
I've never been anti-police, defund the police, until I started doing this work, and I've been terrified and shocked by what I've learned.
So, will this failed American movement now use today's horror report to undermine law and order in the UK, Calvin Robinson?
It is more hard-left American politics, isn't it, coming over here? I generally think that it's individuals that are racist, misogynistic and homophobic rather than institutions. But actually, in this case, the Met does look like a broken institution. It looks corrupt and it does look like it needs overhauling. That does not mean we should defund it. That doesn't mean we should do away with the police. We need a police force when there are burglaries, rapes, murders, and there are increasing numbers of those in London. It was interesting to see our mayor trying to apologise whilst also passing the blame. Like, he's been the mayor of London for how long now? This is his fault. This is his problem.
And as ever, making it all about identity politics, you know. It only matters if you're a minority in Sadiq Khan's
Well,
London.
women aren't a minority, and what I found weird about, I found really actually offensive about his statement was that he was like, sorry if you're BAME, sorry if you're a woman, sorry if you're LGBT. That's most, if you put all of those things together, that's most of the people who live in London. And actually, disproportionately, and I never say this, but disproportionately, actually, women are affected by this issue. The other groups, absolutely, but women mostly. It is endemically sexist, more so than any other ist. And this dodge, it's a constant dodge. It's how many people in the Met are under suspicion of abuse towards women or violence towards women? It's a sickening number. And that sort of like, sorry thing just really minimises how incredibly bad the problem is.
But the issue that I have with your solution, Rebecca, is that you're one of these folk on the hard left who I think very irresponsibly and very recklessly, to be honest, ironic given that we were using that word in regards to Boris earlier, but very recklessly, you just want to defund it.
If I explain this to you, you're going to let me explain it?
Quickly.
OK, when I say defund the police, I do not mean that we should have no emergency police service. What I would like to do is to see that the money we have that is currently allocated to the police, trying to understand where crime comes from and why we have crime. The majority of crime is a result of addiction or lack of social care. It's because people are poor or because people are victims of abuse or because people are addicts. If you stop those things, you stop the majority of crime. Yes, you have to have an emergency service who comes to, like a sort of riot police, to break up active conflict, active fights. But the majority of the social work done by the police is done by people who are not qualified for social
You know
work.
a lot of people equally as crazy as you when it comes to this idea.
Nothing I just said was crazy.
Wanted to do this in the US,
It
right?
was not done well or properly. Do you mean specifically in Atlanta?
Well, no,
broadly?
I'm going to give you a whole load of examples,
Okay.
actually, because I've been researching on this today, because I knew you wanted to defund the police, and I know that it doesn't work. And in the US, the left are getting egg on their face. So have a look at this. July 2020, New York City Council moved $1 billion away from the NYPD's budget. In 2021, shootings in the city up 40.1%.
Where did they reallocate
In
the money to?
2020, I'll let you respond after. I've got some more examples, Rebecca. 2020, San Francisco's mayor moved $120 million away from law enforcement crimes and homicides. It increased by 20%. They were the homicides. In 2022, Fox News analysed data from 7 cities in America and found that violent crimes rose by 40% over 2021. After cuts were made in Portland, that's one of the very famous examples, from July 2020 to February, homicides rose 270.6% in the city. 14 major US cities saw their highest homicide levels on record in 2021. Do you accept now, Rebecca,
No.
that defunding the
That is the
police
worst-
is a joke?
That is
It
the
don't
worst,
work.
That is the worst data set I have ever seen in nearly 2 years of doing this programme. Where was the money reallocated to? Was any of that money reallocated in the way that I very clearly outlined that it
Yes,
would need
they
to be?
reallocated it to community policing very often.
I'm sorry, I would need to see how it was reallocated. Also, this doesn't happen overnight. If you reallocate to social care, you're starting from
So you
people
don't
who
even
are
like see,
children.
even when you've got the facts, even when you've
Those
got the
are
facts of
half the
idiotic
facts.
cities
Those are
in the US
half
that
of
did
the
the same
facts.
thing, you still
That
don't
is
believe
not
it.
a full
Christine
fact, that's
Hamilton.
half a fact.
This is a mad idea, isn't it, Christine? Because what I worry about is, yes, this report is bad, but let's not undermine so much good policing that is done in this country.
Very little good policing.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, never mind what's going on in the States, no, I'm certainly not in favour of defunding the police, but the Metropolitan Police, I mean, we have personal experience of the way they screw things up, going way back till 2001, that when we were very publicly arrested for rape.
Which was
They
appalling.
knew it was a nonsense, but they got their priorities wrong. We've recently had Operation Midland, which is another horrendous example of how they're misallocating funds. And to sit and have to watch Sadiq Khan defending it, it's all been on his watch. Keir Starmer was in favour of reappointing Cressida Dick, and most of this has happened on her watch. It's all been building up. It hasn't just arrived with Mark Rowley. This has been going on for ages. And in answer, you were saying how many people were being investigated. I don't know the number against women, but apparently there are 548 police officers being investigated now, and 111 of those are just working as normal.
Yeah.
And the other thing which
is appalling, but the solution is not defunding the police,
Of course it's not, no, but the other thing...
The solution is totally overhauling the way that
Yes,
this is run.
and one
That's why I say the same
solution,
thing.
one part solution, I think, is, and there was some MP has suggested this, I can't remember who, that they should have a proper charter for whistleblowers, so that whistleblowers, to encourage them to come forward, must have complete and utter
Well, of course,
protection.
because I know it wasn't in the Met, but look at what happened with Maggie Oliver, the great
Yes.
Maggie Oliver, who
Yes.
was on the show earlier in Rochester, and she lost everything
yeah.
because she was a brave whistleblower.
But I don't believe, if I can just, one very
Yes, of course,
quickly,
final
I
word.
do not believe that it is institutional racism. That's
No.
a highly charged emotive term, and that means
it
that
is.
it's the norm. It's not the norm.
Of course it is.
You know.
And it's a highly charged emotive term that the left, again, want to use because they want to say that all of Britain is institutionally racist. And that's why we've got to be very careful with some of the way that this is being covered today. Now, Snowflake student unions continue to put their fragile sensibilities ahead of their university's once proud position as bastions of free speech. Our friend of this show and free speech stalwart, Baroness Claire Fox, is the latest speaker to be deplatformed after Royal Holloway's debating society, well, a hint of irony, bullied the university into cancelling her speech about, wait for it, the importance of discussion. Her heinous crime, she found this Ricky Gervais joke amusing.
Not all women. I mean the old-fashioned ones. You know, the old-fashioned women. Oh, God. You know, the ones with wombs. Oh. Those dinosaurs. Oh. No, I love the new women. I know the new women. They're great, aren't they? You know, the new ones we've been seeing lately. The ones with beards and they're as good as...
And earlier today, during a House of Lords debate on the higher education free speech bill, Baroness Fox called out the hypocrisy of perpetually offended Royal Holloway students who used bullying to silence her. Watch.
Student union bullied a society into disinviting a speaker they wanted to listen to. This is not about me. Yes, OK, my freedom of speech was curtailed, but much, much more significantly, while the student union didn't formally cancel the talk, their hostile reactions created a situation in which students who were keen to hear different opinions were denied the right to do so on a university campus.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. It's time the government gets its act together and starts defending free speech. We'll, of course, continue to shed light on this important topic too. And funny jokes, because we're allowed to laugh at them, aren't we?
Yeah, it was
We're allowed to
funny.
laugh.
For now, anyway.
Rebecca wasn't laughing.
I've seen it like 45 times.
Well, I know, but it's
funny
still
every time.
funny.
I've just seen it so many times.
It's still funny.
Yeah,
He is good.
I think the left don't have much of a sense of humour on these issues.
Ricky Gervais is a lefty, though, isn't he?
Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid, do stand by, because coming up, with political witch hunts launched on both sides of the Atlantic against Boris Johnson here, Donald Trump there, are the lefty detractors of these strong leaders determined to oust anyone they disagree with now? My superstar panel are going to return to have their say on that later in the show. But next, as an ISIS slave reveals she saw Shamima Begum at a terrorist training camp in Syria, would we be asking for trouble if we let her back into the UK? Well, documentary filmmaker Alan Duncan, who spent time filming with ISIS in Syria, certainly thinks so. And he's here to reveal all of the shocking new information that he has uncovered about Begum that you won't see on the BBC straight after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Now, runaway ISIS bride Shamima Begum has spent the last couple of years trying to convince the West that she was a vulnerable schoolgirl hoodwinked by terrorist groomers when she ran off to join the death cult in 2015. As she's fought to return to Britain, politicians have long hinted that there's more to her story than the general public know about, though, without ever going into detail. Here's former Home Secretary Priti Patel doing just that in my interview with her last week.
Now, when you were Home Secretary, you were absolutely clear that this woman must not re-enter the UK. Do you stand by those
Absolutely
comments?
right, absolutely right. And I maintain that, I will always maintain that position on the basis that I have seen the security and intelligence information. And quite frankly, it is the job of the Home Secretary of the day to protect our citizens, protect our countries from individuals who are a threat.
Indeed. And now, in a TV exclusive, documentary filmmaker Alan Duncan is set to reveal damning eyewitness accounts that put Shamima Begum at the heart of terrorist training camps in Syria, where she would have learned to use guns and even build suicide vests. Alan, a former British soldier who later fought alongside ISIS, alongside the Kurds, went on to undertake painstaking interviews with Yazidi sex slaves who suffered at the hands of the group. His latest bombshell interview with a young woman who was kept prisoner by ISIS for 7 years reveals Begum was even friends with a slave master who oversaw the rape and kidnap of girls as young as 14. So look, Alan, your findings about Begum are incredibly shocking. I think it's so important that you've done this work because, of course, what we've seen over the past couple of months, Alan, is this attempt by the BBC, or the British Bashing Corporation, as I call it, to rehabilitate Begum, to try and claim that she's just a victim. So please reveal exactly what you've found out.
Actually, this witness that is on camera, all she's done is confirm what I've been told by other witnesses. However, they can't go on camera because they're involved in trials, or they yet again got family members held still by ISIS. But yeah, and one of them was telling me that Begum was even trying to recruit ISIS females as suicide attackers. Wow. And I've got that on camera.
Wow. And so these are people who were effectively ISIS prisoners of war, who you're now speaking to?
You can't even call it prisoners of war. The Yazidis were captured en masse in 2014. When the world woke up to ISIS on that mountain, that was the Yazidis you seen fleeing. Women and children getting sold by ISIS. That's the Yazidis. You can't call them prisoners of war. They were basically sex slaves, raped and abused for years by ISIS males, and there's not an ISIS one single, there's not a female, there's not one Western female that was not involved in that slavery also. In fact, the Yazidis have told me in many ways the women were, in some cases, worse than the men.
And what we're seeing on camera here, Alan, is you actually showing some of these victims pictures of Shamima Begum. So can you go into a little bit more detail about what they told you about Begum's activities? Because, of course, we've always suspected, we've always had hints at the fact that she was helping male suicide bombers. She was even potentially putting them into suicide vests. But what you've found out actually moves this on, doesn't it? It shows that she was actively involved in the ISIS terror campaign.
Yes, she was actively involved. What set the alarm bells off for me, to be honest, was her husband. When I interviewed her husband, he confirmed to me that she was getting wages from ISIS whilst he was seemingly in prison. Now, I know from interviewing other ISIS, you weren't getting a wage for sitting at home. You had to be actively involved within the organisation. So I've been told that she was in Sharia classes. She was getting trained in weapons. Suicide belts were standard, normal thing there. But I've also been told that she was actively trying to recruit females. Her friend was selling Yazidi women and children. Now, the witness said to me, I can't say that they were best friends outside of the classes. However, only the two of them were hanging about. If they were hanging about together in the classes, trust me, they were best of friends outside. But her husband also, his reaction during the interview as well to the Yazidis, that set alarm bells for myself as well.
Indeed, indeed. So actually, it looks like Begum, and there is her ex-husband, by the way, who you interviewed, it looks like Begum could actually have been far more involved in the terrible, despicable deeds of ISIS than has previously been reported. So how do you feel, Alan, when you see the BBC doing what I have described as some sort of propaganda puff piece to try and paint Begum as a victim? Because I believe you had some harsh words for her previously.
Oh, yeah. What can I say? It's not only the BBC. You've got the Times that made her into a front page cover as if she's some sort of
cover girl,
there's a whole
celebrity
agenda.
cover girl.
There's a drip feeding agenda within the mainstream media. You've got Reprieve, you've got the BBC, you've got the Times, you've got other journalists within that clique as well. They're all trying to drip feed you that ISIS females are now suddenly victims because they fell for the bull. They fell for that bullshit. I witnessed that change at the very start when I was interviewing them. Suddenly they were, instead of saying, well, I had one that said to me, they weren't sex slaves, they were slaves that you could have sex with. That, for me, sums up all the Western ISIS, including Shamima Begum. They didn't have a problem. But tell me something, this mainstream media bleating for Shamima Begum, an ISIS terrorist, and also, it's not about Begum only. She gets back, they all get back, and not one of them will stand trial. Samia Hussein's the perfect example to why they won't stand trial.
Of course. And we will end up funding her for the rest of her days if she ends back in this country. Look, final word, Alan. You actually believe ISIS brides like Shamima Begum would pose a clear and present threat to British security if they were allowed back into the country. Why?
You have to bear in mind, with ISIS, it's not a lost war, it's a lost battle. They think a generation ahead, whereas you and me think a month ahead, a week ahead. For ISIS, it's a long-term goal. Their loyalty is to the caliphate. It's not to Britain. It's not to the country that they come from. It's to the caliphate, no matter how long it takes.
Really disturbing stuff. Incredible work exposing the truth of Shamima Begum, which for some reason the BBC refuses to do. Really, really pleased that you've shared your shocking findings with us tonight. That is the documentary filmmaker Alan Duncan. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, journalist and royal biographer Tom Bower live in the studio to tackle the bombshell revelation that Prince Harry could face deportation for his careless drug confessions. Find out the details of the dopey Duke's visa scandal in Uncancelled shortly. But next in the media buzz, as Donald Trump and Boris Johnson both face political witch hunts launched by their critics, is the stateside fondness for driving top politicians out of public life now spreading to the UK? My superstar panel have this. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front page is hot off the press. That's straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Straight to the front pages. No surprises what they're leading on. The Guardian says tomorrow's kangaroo court against Boris Johnson, where they say he will be fighting for his political survival. The Daily Mirror takes a dig at Boris with the headline, "Last Chance Buffoon." The Daily Telegraph leads with accusations of hypocrisy against Keir Starmer after it has emerged that he has a special pension deal from his time as Director of Public Prosecutions that allows him to avoid tax on his savings. There you go. What a surprise.
No.
More on the media buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, the author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the journalist Rebecca Reid. So Boris Johnson, as we saw there today, published his defence dossier ahead of tomorrow's Kangaroo Court Privileges Committee hearing. But Rishi Sunak, his Chancellor, who spent months trying to depose him, has confirmed he will refuse to intervene in the Westminster witch hunt that he surely hopes will secure his anti-democratic premiership by hammering the final nail into Bojo's political coffin. Watch.
Are you prepared to give your Conservative MPs a free vote on that, to let them vote according to their own wishes? You're not going to tell them how to vote?
Yes, I mean that's generally the rule of thumb with these things. These are matters. Yes, these are matters for Parliament and the House and MPs as individuals rather than for government. So that is the general process that we would follow.
It's a witch hunt. Do you agree?
Look, that's ultimately something for Boris Johnson, and he'll have the committee process to go through, and that's a matter for Parliament. That's not what I'm focused on.
No, of course it's not. You got your fixed penalty notice. You made the same comments in Parliament, and you're not facing the Privileges Committee. I wonder why. Meanwhile, across the pond, a similar pattern has been developing for months now, as US President, probably years, if we're honest, US presidential hopeful Donald Trump faces potential arrest over a historic hush money payment made to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. And much like Bojo, he believes he's been unfairly targeted by those with ulterior political motives.
These 4 horrible, radical left Democrat investigations of your all-time favorite president, me, is just a continuation of the most disgusting witch hunt in the history of our country. The Stormy Horseface Daniels extortion plot. They're all sick, and it's fake news. Our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know that we are the only ones who can stop them, and they know it very strongly.
But could the witch hunts against the Donald and Boris backfire? Both charismatic leaders who have a wave of entrenched public support behind them, which may only grow stronger after this week. So amidst growing concerns that stateside-style witch hunts to drive top politicians out of public life are spreading to Britain, are the left guilty of trying to eliminate those they disagree with from the political landscape? Christine Hamilton.
Well, I think you're being unfair on Rishi Sunak. What he said was absolutely right. This is a parliamentary matter. It would be quite wrong for the Prime Minister to take Rishi out of it, take Boris out of it. The situation that we have, it would be totally wrong if the Prime Minister of the day told MPs how to vote. It's got to be a free vote.
But that's acting, Christine, as if him and his allies had nothing to do with the Partygate investigation into the first place. And I'm sorry, yes, they did.
Yeah, but that's not the question. The question he was asked...
Well, it's not the question now.
No, will you... But he was being asked about now. The whole thing has now rolled forward. It's a parliamentary committee, and that has to take its course.
OK, let me put it to you this way.
The thing is...
No, but why not back Boris, Christine? Because, I'm sorry, Sunak, he worked in exactly the same situation as Boris all of that time. He also received a fixed penalty notice, Christine. Would it have really been too hard for Mr Sunak in that case to say, I worked close up with Boris Johnson over the course of the pandemic, I saw how hard he worked, I know he wasn't partying, he nearly lost his life, and then he did his best. Would it really have hurt Sunak to even just say that about the former Prime Minister?
No, of course it wouldn't.
But he didn't.
It would have been very magnanimous of him to do it. I suppose I'm just being very literal about the situation. No, if he wanted to do that, but you know...
But he doesn't want to, because he doesn't want Boris to come back.
No,
he wants him to be destroyed.
I said earlier, we're going to be left with a choice between a vacuum and a void. We've either got him or Starmer, take a choice which is which. But if the committee, and I'm not at all sure that they will, but if they recommend suspension, it has to be voted on by the House of Commons. The Tory MPs, if they vote for that, they're voting for Christmas. The last thing they should want is a by-election in what is not a terribly safe seat. So I honestly don't think we're going to have the disaster scenario. But yes, of course, Sunak could have reached out a hand of friendship to Boris, but politics is ruthless.
Of course it is. But, Calvin, what a lot of people have not spoken about here is that they think that this is all a Labour stitch-up because of the Keir Starmer scandalous hiring of Sue Gray. And, by the way, that is a national scandal that we will be talking about for many, many weeks. However, what they're not talking about is the fact that actually many of the people who made this happen were Boris's enemies within his own party who wanted a Sunak premiership. And that's what they've now got.
Yeah, we've seen the coup firsthand, and I think there's nothing the British people hate more than an injustice, and we're seeing an injustice play out. So what's happening here is they're making a martyr of Boris Johnson. They're actually increasing his popularity, and that's the problem with character politics. We have adopted US-style character politics. We're seeing the exact same thing with Donald Trump. If he gets arrested, he's going to be the next president.
Yeah.
Do you think Sunak should have stepped in, Rebecca Reid.
I mean, in what world would he? Why would he have done? What would he have possibly gained from it? I think it's an extraordinary thing to consider that he would ever have done. Why? What? Like, I'm confused by why you're asking the question almost, because why would he? What would he have benefited from by doing that?
Well, I'll tell you why.
Would have been kind, I suppose.
Well, no. It's much more than that. No. People are missing. Oh, no, I'll answer your question. People are missing what's at stake tomorrow. What this committee means now, the way that they have changed the definition of what could actually get Boris sanctioned from intentionally misleading Parliament to recklessly misleading Parliament, what that actually means is that this could happen to Sunak. You know, Sunak could go up in Parliament, be asked about some sort of national scandal based on advice from his officials or civil servants. He could give an answer which turned out to be correct, and he could now have political opponents drag him to the Privileges Committee, undermine democracy and force him out as Prime Minister. Is that the sort of system that we want to be operating
I
in?
think that realistically a Prime Minister should be in control of what they say, and the Prime Minister should be aware of what they're saying. And
but they don't. That's not realistic, Rebecca.
It's not
They're
realistic
always
for the Prime Minister
relying
to
on
know what
advice
he's
from
saying.
officials. They are constantly relying on advice from officials.
It's not realistic for the Prime Minister to know what they're saying.
Well, no, they have to rely on advice from officials and civil servants, and they have to believe that what they're being told is largely true.
This was the thing that people cared about most in the country at one point. Not me personally, but lots of people in this country cared more about this than anything else in the entire world. This should have been one where Boris should have been all over it and known everything he was saying. If it's about parking meters, sure, have some spad tell you what to say. If it's the thing that everybody in this country can't stop talking about, get your facts right.
Okay.
It's all. I mean, they're really. It's semantics, isn't it? They're dancing on a head of a pin. As what was a work event? What was a leaving thing? What was a party? What was this? What there was an official photograph. Therefore, it was okay. I mean, it's. Didn't you know tomorrow Boris is going to take about the same amount of time in front of this committee, and I'm sure you said he'll be brilliant. Or somebody said
he probably will be brilliant.
But it's the same amount of time that they spent billing Blair about Iraq. Now that really was serious. 20 years.
And this shames our country.
It is a nonsense.
People cared as much about the two. I'm not saying that's proportionate. I'm not saying it's proportionate, but people feel
but it's wrong.
It's where people are putting all their pain about the pandemic. It's the place where people have put all of their emotional trauma. It is.
The British people don't care about this. It's the mainstream
they
media
did.
and globalists.
Not now. They did. It's not the. Also, Boris Johnson is arguably as much of a globalist as Rishi. So I don't really think that argument holds much water.
Now, look, yesterday in Ecuador, a violent 6.8 magnitude earthquake hit the country, and it tragically killed at least 15 people. And at the time, local sports presenters were actually forced to flee their TV studio following the quake. However, one brave host continued broadcasting even after all of the other presenters had bolted in panic. Watch this.
Dios mío. No importa. Tranquilo, ya pasó. El cambio de clima, tranquilidad.
Hay un pequeño sismo.
Vamos, muy bien. Temblor acá, el edificio acá se mueve fuerte porque es antisísmico, entonces el temblor se siente el doble. Se han ido nuestros compañeros, acá hacemos el aguante nosotros.
What a brave man. I mean, you can literally see the building shaking, and he wasn't leaving. I think my superstar panel would stick with me in solidarity.
Of course we would. Of course
I'd be in my taxi.
Solidarity.
Christina Hamilton, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid. Do stand by, because coming up, was it fair for a Tory councillor to be suspended for saying she does not want pride sex flags or even heterosexual flags on her high street? We're going to discuss that when I crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next in Uncancelled, as Prince Harry's drug boasts raise questions over the accuracy of his US visa application, top royal author Tom Bower live in the studio to tackle the latest Sussex drama. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And Prince Harry has made a series of dim-witted boasts this year about his excessive drug use, including this in his tone-deaf book, Spare.
Of course, I had been doing cocaine around this time. At someone's country house during a shooting weekend. I'd been offered a line and I'd done a few more since. It wasn't much fun. And it didn't make me particularly happy, as it seemed to make everyone around me, but it did make me feel different. And that was the main goal. Feel different.
But those claims could now land the runaway royal in hot water in the US. Conservative think tank The Heritage Foundation is demanding Harry's visa application be released to the public so they can discover if the Duke of Dope declared his drug use before entry into the country. If Harry is found to have lied on his visa form, then he could face deportation from America and be barred from applying for citizenship in the future. Well, top royal biographer Tom Bower joins me now. So, Tom, has Harry just shot himself in the foot?
Well, I think so. I mean, one hopes so in a way, because it'll really discomfort him. I mean, the Heritage Foundation is a really serious right-wing group, but their 7-page submission to the government lists all the reasons why the government must instantly release Harry's visa applications and the rest. And, of course, his problem really is that he's got a title which, again, counts against him in America. But having boasted so much about taking all these drugs, and having boasted that he also shot the Taliban, 25 of them, and then his extraordinary admission of his inconsequential therapy and all the rest of it, we're dealing really at the moment with Harry, I think, looking pretty sad, even sadder than ever before. I think really what is really troubling for me is that his father, King Charles, could even consider wanting Harry to come to the coronation. Here is a man now under investigation in America for having been a serious drug abuser and user, a man who admits he needs therapy all the time, a man who is abusing his title all the time, who's capitalizing on his family's misfortunes. And I think what King Charles's problem now is that many people in Britain will think he's in charge of a madhouse. Yeah. You've got Andrew on one side, Harry on another side. Where is the sanity in the House of Windsor? And that is the real problem, is he's very close now to the coronation. And I think respect will fast drain away from the king if he lets Harry get anywhere near Westminster Abbey.
Well, of course, because these campaigners obviously looking at his visa and we don't know where that will lead. The strange thing is, though, Tom, when it comes to the coronation, still we get all of these polite noises from the House of Windsor. Even suggestions that maybe Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet should get a role in the coronation. What do you make of this?
Well, I just think it is all a reflection of King Charles's indecision. He cannot decide what to do. He wants both a modern ceremony and he wants the ancient rituals. He wants something that appeals to the public and especially to the young who are not real royalists and the diversified community who may be now aggressively against him because of all the racism allegations. So I think what you're seeing really is confusion and mess. And this is a ceremony that's been going on for 1,000 years. What on earth is he playing at? And the Heritage Foundation, in my mind, this investigation of Harry's visa, the conditions in which he was let into America, the supervision he may need to be under, just reflects King Charles's problem. How on earth can he put the interest of himself as a father and how Harry behaves above the institution of the monarchy and the country? And I think we discussed this last week. It's not getting any better. No. Because the leaks about his children having a role, when he hasn't even said that he's going to come to England for the coronation, seems to me just showing utter confusion in Buckingham Palace at the moment.
Indeed. Now, look, Tom, talking about another big figure who you have written on, of course, your widely acclaimed biography of Boris Johnson was called The Gambler. You might argue that tomorrow's Privileges Committee will be the biggest backgamble of his political career because it may determine whether he ever returns to number 10 Downing Street. Now, you obviously closely followed the man for some time. Do you think he's going to thrive under this pressure or collapse?
Well, I think he'll thrive because he loves the battle. I've read very carefully his 52-page submission. Of course, it's very impressive. And it does demolish, to some extent, the committee's credibility. No doubt about that. On the other hand, we haven't heard what the other questions are going to be. And if he makes a mistake tomorrow, they'll have him for garters. They'll eat him up. So can he maintain his cool and rational thought without wandering off? It is a battle for his life. It is a battle for his reputation. But to be honest, he brought it on himself. But on the other hand, I did sympathise with him when he says, number 10 was a hothouse, we were working close together, the official photographer was at these so-called illegal parties. His mistake was to deny anything to the House of Commons. He should have said, I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure, we'll have to look at it. He was just so cavalier, and that is where, it's like the same with Chris Pincher when he denied that. He didn't think before he spoke. I hope he does that tomorrow for his sake, but he's got a challenge tomorrow for sure.
He does have a challenge, but at the same time, he always seems to get through these tough moments, doesn't he? That is one of the stories of Boris Johnson's life, really. Is this just going to end up being another one of those chapters of, it was a tough moment, but actually he came through in a way that other politicians probably wouldn't be able to?
Well, he didn't come through the challenge from 60 Ministers, which forced his resignation, and he gambled there and lost. And I don't think at that moment, he really realised how tough the odds were. I think tomorrow the odds...
He never thought Partygate would finish him off.
No. And he didn't think the lie about Chris Fincher would finish him off. The problem is that there was a whole succession, starting off, of course, with Owen Paterson and all that stuff. Tomorrow he's got to reassert himself as a Prime Minister. He can't be the chaotic journalist. He's got to show magisterial, real authority. He's got to be the master of the brief. He's got to show that he knows more than the committee and turn it on them that they are the vindictive persecutors. If he can do that, he'll win.
Which I believe they are.
Well, but he's got to show it tomorrow.
He does. But I agree with you, having read all 52 pages today myself too. I thought it was incredibly impressive. It was a very well put together argument. But yes, you've got to hope. And we're told, by the way, that he has been rehearsing for hours and hours on this, something he never got the opportunity to do as Prime Minister. You've got to hope he's going to have the master.
He's got a huge legal team. I mean, it's much bigger than Panic. There are about 5 or 6 top-rate lawyers going through it with him. But he's got to, in the end, turn it against Harriet Harman and Bernard Jenkins and say, you are changing the rules, you're the people who are persecuting me and not giving me a fair chance, and let them have to answer for themselves. If he can do it, he may get away with it.
Tom Bauer, the biographer of Boris Johnson, and Meghan Markle, of course. Thank you so much, Tom. We'll see you next week. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Christine Hamilton, who are you going to nominate for your GB tonight?
Well, my GB are the members of the European Reform Group who have fired a magnificent shot across, I nearly said Boris, Rishi's bows, opposing the half-truths, frankly, that were told in the Windsor framework. I just hope that they've got the balls to follow through and vote against it.
And, of course, we had Andrea Jenkins from the ERG on earlier.
We did, indeed.
She said that she was going to vote against. Watch. So, Andrea, you're a Spartan.
Yes.
You know, you're a true Brexit believer. Can you tell me now whether you're going to vote for the Stormont break tomorrow?
No, I'm going to vote against, Dan.
So you're going to join Mark Francois?
Oh, completely.
And the DUP?
And the DUP.
Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
Very sound, Andrea. Mine is Councillor Angela Kilmartin, who was suspended for saying sex is for the bedroom, not for displaying preferences in public. When people wanted to put pride sex flags up on the high street, she said no, and she got suspended for it. Put the Union flag up if you want to put a flag up.
And I believe we're going to have her on this very show tomorrow night, speaking about this on television for the first time. Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Because I haven't done this for a while. Honorary Taylor Swift. Her Eras tour started this week. It's 3 hours, 15 minutes, 44 songs. That is an incredibly hard-working woman.
Yeah, do you know what? I was actually genuinely impressed by that, because it's very easy, isn't it, to knock out a 90-minute show, and she was putting the hours in. But I am going to go with Christine Hamilton and the ERG for standing up for Brexit. Mark Francois on the show tomorrow night too, by the way. Christine Hamilton, who's your nominee for Union Jackass?
Well, my nominee for Jackass is the BBC, because they are producing a version of Great Expectations, and they've changed the endings. They've made Miss Havisham into an opium addict, and they've I have to do this because of the name, Mr. Pumpelchook indulges in a naked S&M session. This is so far from the classic Dickens. Pip uses appalling swear words. I mean, it is outrageous.
Typical BBC.
I mean,
Calvin Robinson.
Rewrite a great Dickens classic. They just can't.
But they will.
They blooming have.
Calvin Robinson, your nominee?
James O'Brien and all the other so-called journalists who've been really abusing Suella Braverman unfoundedly this week. It's been horrible to see.
And Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
I think it might be in Calvin. It might be in Calvin's category. Mine's Suella Braverman. Partially for the photo itself, but also just for the chronic mishandling. It's part of this thing of doing very little and saying lots of mean things, making everyone cross.
They were cropping the photograph and doing all kinds of nastiness.
And by the way, how intellectually dishonest was it? Because there is the photograph, Rebecca. There is the photograph, Rebecca.
And that's a lovely, wonderful photograph right there. Just four human beings together having a laugh.
It's not a lovely, wonderful photograph.
What's wrong with it?
She's standing... I mean, the whole plan is pretty horrible, and the fact that she's looking celebratory in the middle of it...
Mariana, stop nodding. You're not on the panel. I think if people want to give jobs to people that are searching for housing and searching for lives, that's a wonderful thing.
And the interior design comment, all of it is just hideous. It just shows a real lack of human awareness. It's not seeing these people as human, and that really
it was
hurts.
incredibly intellectually dishonest to crop that photograph, and that's what James O'Brien did, because he's not a journalist. I am going to go with Christine Hamilton and the BBC for rewriting Great Expectations in the most appalling way. But thank you so much, my superstar panel double winner Christine Hamilton tonight, alongside Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. Thank you so much for your company tonight. Big show tomorrow night. We're going to bring you the coverage of the Boris Johnson witch hunt that the rest of the media will not. Next up, though, it's Headliners. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the top stories tonight. And a damning report into Britain's largest police force has been described by the Home Secretary as very concerning. Baroness Louise Casey, who led the review, found the Met Police to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. The report also found the Met's current ethics standards and disciplinary procedures had failed abysmally. She's calling for a complete overhaul of the service. Suella Braverman says she has every faith now Commissioner Mark Rowley will be a catalyst for change, and she's personally vowed to hold officers and the Mayor of London to account. Well, in other news today, Boris Johnson has accepted he misled Parliament over Partygate, but he maintains it wasn't intentional and it wasn't reckless. Submitting his 52-page defence dossier to the Privileges Committee, the former Prime Minister admitted gatherings at Downing Street during lockdown should never have happened. He also said statements in the House of Commons were made in good faith. He's due to give more evidence in person before MPs tomorrow. International news, and Russia has strengthened ties with China, saying it's prepared to step up its oil deliveries to the country. President Putin made the comments on the second day of the Chinese leader's state visit to Moscow, describing talks between the two of them as constructive, adding he hopes they'll remain in constant contact. Yesterday, President Putin welcomed his dear friend to the Kremlin, and the pair discussed China's peace plan for Ukraine. Now, a group of Eurosceptic Conservative MPs has described parts of the Prime Minister's new Brexit deal with the EU as practically useless. The European Research Group commissioned lawyers to scrutinise the Windsor framework ahead of tomorrow's vote on the Stormont break element of the proposal. A spokesperson for Rishi Sunak says it is a good deal, and he's urging lawmakers to back it. Lastly tonight, people have been protesting outside Trump Towers in New York, calling for the authorities to condemn the former US president over an alleged hush money payment. Donald Trump has been accused of paying off a porn actress in the run-up to the 2016 elections. If Trump is charged, it'll be the first criminal case brought against a US president. Former National Security Advisor to Mr Trump, John Bolton, told Nigel Farage earlier on this evening the important matter would be if Mr Trump was convicted.
The real question here is not whether Trump gets indicted. I think that's coming in days. I don't know exactly when, but it's days, not weeks, in the Stormy Daniels matter. The real issue is, will he get convicted? If he is acquitted, I think that will give Trump the Republican nomination and could elect him to the presidency.
John Bolton. You are up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Time now for Headliners.
Thank you, Polly. Hello, welcome to Headliners, the best paper review show around and the most humble, I think. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, we have two comedic giants, literally and figuratively. We have Leo Kearse and Scott Capurro. How are you both?
All right.
Yes. You look as if you've just been dragged back from your holidays, both of you.
Just getting ready for summer.
Are you okay? You've been off a bit poorly?
Yeah, I just had a bit of a cold.
Yeah, not the heavy-duty throat lozenge job. Some people have been really sweating it lately. I'm a bit anxious about that one.
Well, I mean, it was man flu, so we can't underestimate the severity.
Have you managed to dodge all of this, Scott?
Yes, I was in the Czech Republic telling jokes.
Were you really?
They import their comedians there, obviously.
Yeah.
And, especially like me, a Jewish one, because they've run out. It was great there, though. It was really mountainous.
There's a tradition of dissident comedy in the Czech Republic, isn't there, being used to bring down authorities and so on?
I think they played along too much, actually. In fact, when I went to leave, they were like, bye-bye, and I'm like, you might watch that. Brings back some painful memories for people like me.
Right, let's have a quick peek at Wednesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail up first. Bullish Boris up for the fight. Meanwhile, a picture of Gwyneth Paltrow is also up for a fight of a slightly less momentous nature. The Guardian. Johnson faces fight for political survival at Partygate hearing, and there once again is Gwyneth Paltrow, universally acknowledged to be more picturesque than the ex-Prime Minister. The Financial Times. Falling life expectancy triggers delay to raising of state pension age to 68. If you think that's bad, you should move to France. The Telegraph. Hypocrite. Starmer to avoid tax on pension. The Times. Pill and coil, not a new double act, but contraceptive methods shown to raise breast cancer risk. And the Daily Star, as ever, go their own way. Pinocchio, I'm not a liar, I'm just a moron. There he is, that's Boris's defence. Precede with a degree of liberal margin there by the Star. Those were your front pages. Paraphrase, that's the word I wanted, not précis. So let's kick things off with the front page of the Daily Mail, Leo.
So the front page of the Daily Mail, they've got a picture of Gwyneth Paltrow wearing a big long coat. She sort of looks like two children, when they sit on each other's shoulders to get to the cinema for the price of one ticket.
Those are not her legs, are they?
She needs to eat a meal. Look how skinny she is. From top to bottom, she's the same width.
Yeah. Apparently she hit somebody.
Coat.
She hit somebody when she was skiing, clattered into them and did them damage. I'd have thought she'd just bounce off. But yeah, the main story is Boris. It says, bullish Boris up for the fight, which is a classic Daily Mail sort of rabble-rousing Boris headline. So apparently Partygate, the people are saying Partygate is gonna bring Boris Johnson down. Don't think they've heard. He's